Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi wakafa wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'dahu amma ba'd. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد تلك الدار الآخرة نجعلها للذين لا يريدون علوا في الأرض ولا فسادا صدق الله العظيم. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حب المال والجاه ينبتان النفاق في القلب كما ينبت الماء والبقلة. Respected listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, today is the seventh session of the series on the muhlakat, those things that annihilate and destroy a person spiritually, as explained by Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayh in his book Al-Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din, the 40 principles of religion. Alhamdulillah, this is the seventh lecture, but we're actually on the sixth point. And the sixth point is a very delicate issue. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi says that the sixth thing that destroys a person is ru'una wa hubbul jah. Ru'una, self-decoration, presenting someone or presenting oneself in a greater way. And then hubbul jah, and also the love of jah, the love of status. Everyone's hankering after status, hankering after status, trying to present oneself as to be greater, trying to get a status within the dunya itself, to come ahead and go ahead of people. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi in this section, he mentions this issue. And he goes and he says that this is a very delicate issue. It's one of the destroyers of a person spiritually. He mentions a verse of the Quran in which Allah Almighty says, Tilka darul akhiratu, that the hereafter, the life and the abode of the hereafter, naj'aluha, we make for those la yuriduna uluwan fil ardi, who do not want a high status in the earth. They want to be humble, simple. Wala fasada, nor do they spread corruption or do they want corruption. And in terms of the fadail of being humble and not seeking jah or status, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, Hubbul mal wal jah, that the love of wealth and the love of status, yumbitan in nifaq, grow nifaq and hypocrisy in the heart, kama yumbitul ma wal baqla, in the way that water grows plants. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he also says in a hadith, ma zibani dariyani ursila fi zaribati ghanamin, that there are not two vicious wolves that are sent inside a stable full of sheep, two vicious wolves that can spread more corruption and ruin everything inside the stable. All the animals could die. Min hubbil mal, than the love of wealth and jah, and also status in the deen of a person, of a Muslim person. And if you think about it, that the Islam and our religious establishments, those things that our akabir and our mashayikh have established, two things can ruin them very easily: love of wealth and love of status. I want to be the big one. I want wealth, corruption, nepotism, all of these things come into it. That these two things could ruin this whole idara, establishment, the work of deen, the work of a house in itself, a family, everything, all could be ruined just because of the love of wealth and the love of status. And then a person's deen is finished. So you should suppress these feelings as much as you can. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Fi madhil khumul," in praising the person who wants a low profile. He doesn't want many likes. He doesn't want many followers. I have a bit of a guilt. I'm one of the guilty ones on that. He doesn't want many followers. He doesn't want a great following on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter and all the corruption that comes with that. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Rubba ash'atha aghbara dhi timrain la yu'bahu lahu law aqsama lillahi la abarrahu." That there are many disheveled ones, dusty-faced, in tattered clothing. No one pays attention to them. If they were to do qasam upon Allah, then Allah will fulfill the qasam. And there's all these pious people who are hidden. Nobody knows about them. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that indeed the people of Jannah is every single person who is ash'ath, disheveled, in a balhidanati. Aghbar, he's dusty, his face is dusty, zitim rain, He's wearing tattered clothing. Nobody pays attention to him. Alladina, when they, إِذَا اسْتَأْذَنُوا الْأُمَرَاء, they ask for permission to sit by the princes, لَمْ يُؤْذَنْ لَهُمْ, then nobody pays attention to them. He can't get an audience. If he wants to go and see the MP, he can't get an audience. If he wants to go and see a minister, he doesn't get the audience. Who is he? وَإِذَا خَطَبُوا النِّسَاء, when they ask for the hand in marriage of a lady, لَمْ يَنْكَحُوا, they're not able to do the nikah. وَإِذَا قَالُوا لَمْ يَنْصُدْ لَهُمْ, when they speak, nobody silences themselves for them. هَوَائِجُ أَحَدِهِمْ تَتَجَلْجَلُ فِي صَدْرِهِ, their needs reverberate in their chest, it doesn't come out. But Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that these people are close to Allah. لَوْ قُسِمَ نُورُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَلَى النَّاسِ, if their light and their nur was to be distributed on the day of judgment amongst the people, لَوَسَعَهُمْ, then it would encompass them all. Why? Because they're full of nur and Allah's acceptance and qurb they have. And then he mentions a few more things. And then he ends and he says, وَفَقَدْ عَرَفْتَ بِهَذَا مَذَمَّةُ الشُّهْرَةِ وَالْجَاهِ, from this you've understood the reprehensibleness or how bad shuhrat, fame and jah and status actually is, except on one condition. And يُشْهَرُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَبْدًا فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ غَيْرِ طَلَبٍ مِنْهُ, that Allah Almighty makes the person famous in deen without him seeking it. He doesn't go running after it. He doesn't want the status. But Allah Ta'ala for some reason has decreed that this person should become famous or he should be widely known. He's always checking his heart at the same time and doing a reality check. But he doesn't want it, but Allah Almighty has destined for him to become famous or become well known. Why? So that he can do the work of deen. كما شهر الأنبياء والخلفاء الراشدين والأولياء, in the way that the Anbiya, the prophets and the Khulafa and the Khalifs, the four rightly guided Khalifs, والأولياء, and the pious individuals became famous. So that's it in a nutshell. Reality of jah, status. Two things that could ruin a person's deen, in the way that two vicious wolves were to enter a stable and ruin the entire stable. Love of wealth and love of status. And we all want it as we get older. We all want it. You work in the NHS, you want to climb the ladder. Social mobility, they call it. It's a nice way of saying it. Yeah? When you drop an email to someone, you want them to listen. Yeah? You got your signature strip there. You want to pull the strings. But at the end of the day, the person khamul, the person who's humble, disheveled hair, his clothes aren't right. His trousers are worn in a way that one side is higher than the other. Yeah? His socks have holes in them, but he's accepted by Allah Almighty. Allani guy. He's accepted by Allah Almighty. So what does jah mean? The reality of jah means status or position. It's the yearning to capture people's hearts. Mara kabza mein aave. I have them. I've got them in my hand. Mara mutti mein aavi gaya. He yearns that he's praised. And then people complete what he wants. If I say something, it happens. If I say and demand something, it happens. I just have to look. Yeah? Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi says that this refers to milkul qulub. This is what the Sufis call milkul qulub, possessing of hearts. He wants to possess people's hearts. Right? So he can control them. He wants people to praise him so they can feed his ego. And they strive to fulfill his need. Now the question is jah and wealth similar? And the Imams of the ulama mention, especially the Mutasawwifin and the Sufis, they say that jah and wealth, status and wealth go hand in hand. This is what dunya actually means. Wealth means milkud darahim, possession of money, to fulfill one's needs. Whereas jah and status is milkul qulub, to have their hearts. Imam Hakim al-Ummah Moulana Shafi'i Thanvi rahmatullah alayhi, he says that there are rulings to jah. And I brought some of Hazrat Thanvi's in as I do. And he says there's several levels of jah or status. One is it for a person to be acquired by itself. He is not seeking it, but it comes his way. He's given a promotion at work. Or he's doing the work of deen and he gets some sort of recognition for his work of deen. He's not seeking it, but hearts have turned towards him. When you man tawada'a lillah, those people that become low, rafa'ahu Allah, Allah Ta'ala brings them up. He says this is from Allah Almighty, this is permissible. And a person should keep checking himself, but carry on, it's fine. The second is he didn't acquire it, but others acquired it for him. In the way that a king is made a king. Yeah? In the way that the kings, he didn't acquire it himself, but others made him. They give him the responsibility. Yeah? The second is a Wahhabi. It's not given from Allah Almighty, but through others. And the ruling for this is, it's permissible for him to benefit from this. But he should be careful of two things. He should benefit other people, and at the same time, he should also he should ensure not to harm his own religion on account of it. Yeah? The Machiavellian stuff, machinations, I think that's the right word. The playing of the game in order to get ahead politically, yeah? Within the workplace, within the Dini Idaras, within the work of Deen, whatever type of work, all those machinations, put it aside. We're here for the work of Deen, let's focus on that. And the third is to try himself. So he plays the game. The ruling for this is that it's not permissible except in certain situations. Anyway, jah in itself, as Tanvi says, in a measured way. For there to be some jah is permissible. But it has to be measured. He also says, where it's misused and acquired through the wrong way, this is not permissible. Some points Imam Ghazali mentions, he says, what is worse? Love of status or love of wealth? Yeah? We talk about dunya, you get dunyawi marascha. Running after the wealth, it's reprehensible. But the question is, what's worse? Running after status or running after wealth? Imam Ghazali rahmatullah actually says that status or jah is worse than wealth. The question is why? The answer he gives is that gaining wealth is easier than gaining wealth through jah, through status is easier than than trying to do vice versa. If you got money and then you want status, it's a bit difficult. But if you got status and you want money, it's easier. And he also says that jah stays with a person. It can't be stolen, robbed, affected by some sort of calamity. It grows and it increases without any effort. And he says because of this, it's a bit complicated. It's a bit complicated and it's worse than wealth. He also says there's another reason which he goes into, and he explains that every person wants to be great. He wants to be revered and respected. He wants it such that he is the only person. However, this uniqueness and being unique is a quality of Allah Almighty. This exclusive to Allah Almighty. But the way insan has been created, he wants to be like Allah Almighty. He tries to replicate this. He wants to control other people. He wants to be revered and honored. He wants them to think he is perfect. And by this, his jah and his status increases. He wants to become famous. But our Sharia tells us you should suppress those feelings. You should suppress those feelings. And when a person wants to be great, then he starts doing funny things. He does crazy things. Hakim ul-Ummat, Mujaddidul Millat, Moulana Shafi Thanvi rahmatullah alayh, in his Malfuzat, he mentions a story. He says there was a man, a very pious man. He was a very simple man. You know, one of those individuals that wore a kurta, pajama, with a white beard. He sent his son to England. This is the colonial period. Hazrat Thanvi rahmatullah alayh, he likes to poke fun at, those people that like to imitate, inferiority complex. Yeah, surtai wale, boot wale, that's what he used to call them. Yeah, in his time. We didn't call them that, but that's what he refers to. Gentleman Sahib, he used to call them. Or he called them Bahadur Sahib. Why? Because the British used to give people titles. Bahadur. If someone was loyal to the country, to the motherland, they used to give them a title, Bahadur this, Bahadur that. So Hazrat Thanvi in his Malfuzat, he calls him Bahadur Sahib. Hazrat Thanvi rahmatullah alayhi, he says that there was a man, he sent his son to England. He became a barrister, he came back, called to the bar. He came back, he's wearing a suit. And then he had to go some city. So he took his father along. His father is a bichara Haji Sahib with a beard, white beard, kurta, pajama, champal. He goes, they had to go and visit someone. He goes inside, does malakat. His father does malakat. They sit down. Mizaj bi khairiyat se hai. Kaisi khabar hai? Everything okay? He says, yeah. Everything, how's everything? So they exchange pleasantries. Then he says, who is this with you? So then the barrister sahab says, oh, he's just an acquaintance, jaan pehchan wala hai. He's just a acquaintance. Abhi Haji sahab ko gussa aa gaya. He became angry. He said, are, aisi baat nahi hai. He says, oh, that's not the case. मैं उसकी माँ का acquaintance हूँ. मैं उसकी माँ का जान पहचान वाला हूँ. He says, I'm not his acquaintance. I'm his mother's acquaintance. It was an embarrassing situation. But the fact is, the reality is, the Tanvir Rahmatullah, he has a lot of those stories. And, I thought I'd share a few more if time permits. I mean, we're going to have a bit of a pause for a couple of weeks because I'm going on journey. So I'll tell you a few more jokes and I might go over by 5-10 minutes. But I bought a kitab, Hazrat Tanvir's kitab. He says, ek gentleman ka kissa, a story about a gentleman. He says, ek unche saab the. He was a very lofty person, gentleman the. Lekin ghar ke garib the. He says he was a gentleman in that time in the colonial period, but he was very poor. Yeah. इसलिए कोट पैटलून भी सिर्फ सूती कपड़ों का था. He said that's why he used to wear a suit and tie, but his suit and tie was made from cheap cotton. Yeah. There was no zara garmi na thi, yani there was no warmth in it. Jare ka mausam, it was cold winter. Rail mein safar kar rahe the, he was traveling in winter by the train. Gentleman libas pehne hue the, he was wearing his suit and tie. Yeah, but it was winter time and he's wearing summer clothes. कान भी खुले हुए, his ears were open, सर भी खुला हुआ, his head was open. एक अंग्रेज ने लेमन पानी और बर्फ पिया. He came across an Englishman on the train who was having lemon juice with ice in winter. आपने भी तकलीद में बर्फ पिया. He said that in following this person, उसने भी पी लिया. Why? Because they had some sort of inferiority complex. They like to follow them. Hota tha. I think us guys living here, we've changed a little bit. We don't have so much of an inferiority complex. But people back home, they have sometimes can have a bit of an inferiority complex. But he says at that point, his pride disappeared. Why? Because he started shivering. He became extremely cold. एक और साहब वो मुझसे इस हिकायत को बयान करते थे. Another person who was telling me this story, and who was sitting in the cabin at the time, and he had a blanket with him, North India, very cold. उनको साहिब बहादुर के हाल पर रहम आया. He started feeling sorry for the Sahib Bahadur. Hazrat Rahmatullah Alayh is calling him by that title. और उन्होंने कहा रज़ाई लेते हो. He says, will you take the blanket? कुछ इनकार न किया. He said his pride had gone. He didn't say no. और ले ली. And he says उनकी सब ain't मरोर निकल गई. He said his all pride just finished straight away. Hazrat Tanvir Rahmatullah, he has these stories. There's another one here. A very short one, it's an interesting one. एक और साहिब बहादुर रेल में सफ़र कर रहे थे. Another person like this was traveling in the train. एक मौलवी पुराने ख्याल के सीधे साधे चलन के भी उसी दर्जे में बैठे हुए थे. There was a Moulana sahab who was sitting in that cabin, dressed in the old way, kurta pajama. This guy is dressed in suit. और उनके साथ सुराही थी. But this Moulana sahab, he also had a flask with him, made from, probably from what do you call it, clay, a clay flask with water. And the reason why he had this water inside was because the journey was a long journey, it's hot, and water would be needed on this particular journey. And he had experienced that they'd be thirsty later on. When this Bahadur Sahib saw this person, he said to him, क्या बंगियों का सा बर्तन लिया है? क्या बंगियों सा बर्तन लिया है? He says, are you carrying a little clay pot in the way that the bungis, the bungis are those people who used to clean the toilets inside the old villages because they didn't have a proper flush system, so they'd come and clean. So he's taking the mick out of him and he's saying, are you carrying a pot in the way that the bungis carry? उन्होंने कहा कि जैसा मैं हूँ वैसा मेरा बर्तन. In the way I am is also my pot. चूंकि बेचारे सारे कपड़े पहन रहे थे, because he's wearing simple clothes. ऐसे लोगों के आजकल कुछ कदर नहीं, and such people are not treated very respectfully. बल्कि ऐसा लोगों को ये लोग दकियानूसी ख्याल करते. They think that they're old fashioned. Yeah? इसलिए उन्होंने ऐसी बेबाकी से गुफ्तगी की. साहिब बहादुर को इत्तिफाक से प्यास लगी. It so happened that later on the Sahib Bahadur became thirsty. Yeah? He became thirsty. इसलिए उन्होंने ऐसी हाँ, और पानी साथ रखना खिलाफे तहजीब था, and he hadn't got any water with him. Why? That's not considered to be respectable in those days. The British never did it, apparently. अब लगे किन आंखों से मौलवी साहब की सुराही को टिकने. So then he began looking and staring at the Moulana Saab's flask. मगर शर्म के मारे मांगे नहीं. But he wasn't able to ask him because of his being ashamed. Then Moulana Thanvi says that Maulvi Saab को उनकी हालत पर रहम आया. Moulana Saab started feeling sorry for him. कोई और होता तो कभी रहम ना करता. He wouldn't feel sorry for him. उन्होंने कराइन से मालूम कर लिया. He understood कि he's thirsty, but because of sharam and shamefulness, he's not asking. So what this Moulana then did was he lied down and he pretended to go to sleep. He pretended to go to sleep. और थोड़ी सी देर में मसनूई खराते भरने लगे. And after a bit, he started faking his snoring. Yeah. This person thought that he's gone to sleep. So he got up and he goes over to the Moulana Sahib and he takes his flask. Yeah. और हाँ, लेकिन ये चुपके चुपके देखते रहे. But the Moulana Sahib is quietly, secretly watching. साहिब बहादुर ने सुराही उठाई, मगर डरते जाते हैं कहीं जाग न जाए. He picks up the flask and he begins drinking, but he's also fearful that maybe he doesn't wake up. मगर उस वक्त उन्होंने कुछ नहीं कहा. He didn't say anything. Let him drink. उस ख्याल से कि बेचारे गरीब को पानी पी लेने दो, प्यासा है. लेकिन फिर उसके बाद क्या हुआ? आफ्टर उसने खूब पानी पी लिया तो और सुराही रखने लगे तो मौलवी साहब ने फौरन हाथ पकड़ लिया. मौलाना grabbed hold of his hand. Straight out of a sitcom, comedy sitcom. हाय, आपने बंगियों के बर्तन से पानी कैसे पी लिया? He said, how did you drink the water from the pot of the bungis? अब तो बड़े खफीफ हुए. He became quite ashamed और कहा माफ़ कीजिए, forgive me, मैं अपनी बात को वापस लेता हूँ. I'll take my word back. वाकई मुझसे हमाकत हुई. Definitely I was a bit silly. और फिर साहिब बहादुर को मालूम हुआ. Then the साहिब बहादुर realized कि मौलाना किसी स्कूल के प्रोफेसर भी है. That the Moulana is also a professor at a school. अब तो लगे ताज़ीम करने. And then he started respecting him. So, at the end of the day, status, this is what happens when status. People, this is a bit of a funny joke of what happens, but the reality is when a person seeks status, he starts playing around with things. And he starts doing things that's not correct. Now, Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi, he says, and he talks about the reality of loftiness, status, in being blameworthy and praiseworthy. He says, every person has one day to die. And one's fame and jah and status will one day come to an end. If he acquires some sort of status in the dunya, right, it's temporary. The status is only with those people. And then what? So it's not something that's a positive trait. But perfection in a person's deen, and that is something that remains with somebody even after death. It stays with him forever and aware. And perfection in deen is proximity and qurb to Allah Almighty. He says when a person who is close to Allah, then this perfection increases. And then he says that the removing of the status from your heart is necessary. You got to remove its love from the heart. And then he asks people, if the people of the earth, this is the ilaj as well, if the people of the earth were to prostrate to you, then after some time the prostrator and the person doing sajda, and the person that's being prostrated to the object will not remain. Then he says that it is surprising that time is so stingy with you that it does not give you complete rulership in your own home, let alone your village and town, but then you still hanker after this. And then he says, how can you be happy to leave the perpetual work, which is the work of the hereafter? And that status in the eyes of Allah, which is so vast, for this despicable status in the dunya, which is temporary, which excites a group of fools who do not benefit you, can harm you not, have no control over death, life and resurrection, risk and no time. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi then has another section. He says that a bit of jah is permissible, a bit of status is permissible. That man is required to have some status in the way that a bit of wealth is necessary to help one's deen. Likewise, to have a better status, it's also necessary to have some according to need in order to save himself from difficulties, save himself from the zulm of people, and he's able to protect himself. He is then able to peacefully involve himself in worship, and this is permissible with the condition that you only suffice on how much you need. But he says that you cannot acquire this with ostentation, riyah in worship, which is haram, etc. And then lastly, he then mentions the cure in detail. He says that the main cause of seeking jah or status is love of praise. And a person enjoys this for 3 reasons. Number 1, he is praised. When he is praised, he thinks he is perfect, which he enjoys. However, perfection is the quality of Allah Almighty. If the praise were to come from an ordinary person, it wouldn't make a difference to him. So that's the first one. So when he is praised, he thinks he is perfect, which he enjoys. However, the perfection is the quality of Allah, and if it comes from an ordinary person, he's not bothered. He wants it to come from a higher person. That's number 1. The second reason why he likes praise is he thinks he possesses the heart of the person. He has him under his control. And he has a status in front of him. And the third reason is that he now thinks that he's become famous and his status increases. So then Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi, he gives the cue, and he says that is it due to wealth and status? Is the praise due to wealth and is it to status? And he says that these are not things that a person should be proud about. Why? Because these are kamale wahmi. These are perfections that are in his mind. That comes to an end after death. The real thing that a person should be should be happy about is kamale hakiki. The real perfection, and the real perfection is the marifat of Allah, the proximity to Allah, to be qareeb to Allah, and to be liked and loved by Allah Almighty. And this is the perfection. The second thing he says is the perfection due to knowledge and piety? And then he gives 2 scenarios. He says, does the person actually have knowledge, and is he actually pious? If he is, then he shouldn't be praised with the praise of Allah Almighty, but he should thank Allah, but not the people. What have other people to do with his piety? And if this doesn't exist, if he isn't pious, but people are praising him because they think he's pious, then he should do afsos on himself. Why? Because he knows his reality from the inside. So to sum up, basically, Imam Ghazali in this 6th section mentions ru'una, yani khud arai, self-decoration, and love of jah, and the love of status. And he mentions the hadith when Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that 2 wolves let wild, vicious wolves let wild in a stable full of sheep are not more harmful to a person's deen than love of wealth and love of status. And these are feelings that a person should suppress. And when a person inshallah suppresses, then a person's deen is protected. The establishments of deen are protected. The work of deen in all its form, wherever you are, is also protected. Houses become better, families become better, families are united, and inshallah through a very strong community, and a strong community where work of deen of all types are taking place, is where the betterment and the rise of the ummah inshallah will take place. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah for the next 3 weeks there won't be any dars. After that, in January, inshallah there will be dars. I'm going away for Umrah. If I've said anything to anyone, opportunity on the mic for people at home and on the internet and within the masjid to forgive me in all ways. I make dua that Allah Almighty accepts my safar. Inshallah next Sunday, Friday program will continue. Jazakumullah khair wa akhir da'wana. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.